Good evening, everyone. We'll just wait for people to join, but fantastic to see so many familiar faces, including some past students, which is lovely to see.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Mario.
Nice to see you.
Just to give people a little idea of what we're going to do. I mean, obviously, we want to make this as open and convivial as possible in true J. Blumler style. And really, this is very much about the conveners and the past conveners of the Media and Politics group, very much wanting to honour Jay's work and his support for the group. And so I think, so I've asked a few people in advance who are going to give short talks. But, you know, if you do want to say something or if you want to put something in the group chat, you're very welcome to as well, if you haven't in advance. So really, that's why we did it as a Zoom meeting like this, to give people the opportunity to say something if they would like to. Okay. Okay. So as you all know, Jay very sadly passed away on the 30th of January this year. And most of you know that Jay was the Honorary President for the Media and Politics group. And we really just wanted to hold this meeting to appreciate the inspiration that Jay was for many of us, and to pay tribute to his legacy as a scholar, but really, you know, to also pay tribute to his kindness and enthusiasm as well. So I think I will ask Dominic to go first, if that's okay, Dom, because you are the co-founder of the Media and Politics group. So if you would like to start by saying a few words about the start of the group and Jay's role in it, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Katie. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for organising this meeting, Katie, and for colleagues at Leeds paying tribute to Jay. And it's an honour to kick this off. I mean, my dealings with Jay go back since I was a graduate student, and I had the privilege of contributing to the tribute to him in the recent newsletter. And but beyond that, and I mean, it's 25 years ago since this group got going, the network. It was at the Glasgow PSA all those years ago. And almost from the outset, Jay was an enthusiastic member, like everybody else in the network who got involved. And most of us were early career researchers. There were some people from media studies, but there was a fair few from politics. And what Jay really brought was, you know, the breadth and the expertise and just the enormous enthusiasm from the get-go. And it really made a huge success and a difference to us as a group in terms of getting going and getting established. I mean, a few years after we got going, and we were kind of like thinking, is this going to take off? And with Jay's help and the investment of his time and his enthusiasm and his energy and his name, you know, he gave his name to the group. It gave it enormous credibility. You know, it really got us on the map. And, you know, Colin Seymour Yost said, he said it works because it brings together people finally in a way that hadn't happened before. I mean, MEXA was still not kind of the group it is now, the strength and depth that it represents. And traditional political science, which had pretty good networks established, so, you know, sadly, the study of media still is somewhat peripheral and something that people did in their leisure time. I mean, it's kind of laughable now thinking back, but it's not that long ago. You know, this was pretty commonplace. And so there was a sort of, you know, people like Jay and Colin were very much isolated. And so they really were enthusiastic about this network when it got going. And so there was really established people like them. And then there was a lot of younger people, Mark and myself and others. And it just went on from there. And you know, what he brought to it was just this enormous wealth of expertise and interest. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to encapsulate what he did, but you know, when I got to know him better and understood where he'd come from, I mean, it's like incredible intellectual journey before Leeds and all the things that happened there. And he was talking a bit about this when we organised an event for him at Leicester at the IMCR in 2016, and he came and there was a tribute. And it was like virtually packed out. This it was quite a sizable room in the Charles Wilson building at that major conference. You know, there were all sorts of parallel sessions going on. And a lot of people, especially early career people, came to see him from all around the world to see Jay Blumler speak. And it was great because the meeting was a wonderfully warm one. And Dennis McQuail came in. He was unannounced. And he, sadly, obviously, he didn't live that long after, and I don't know, it was the last public meeting together, but it was a wonderful moment. And, you know, Dennis had come up all the way from where he was living, I think, in Hampshire, to see Jay again and to participate in this wonderful tribute. And at the meeting, Jay talked about his intellectual trajectory, and it's really remarkable thinking, you know, before he got going in media and politics, he was established as he was teaching politics at Ruskin College, you know, which is a really interesting place in adult education, all that, you know, kind of passion about knowledge. And I mean, sadly, adult education has declined, to say the least, in this country. But, you know, Jay was at that centre of the heart, you know, at Oxford, where things were really happening. And he knew people like, you know, again, people who are not necessarily not well known now, but at the heart of social democratic politics, you know, in the 1950s, Rita Hindon, Alan Flanders. And I was talking to him about this, and you know, and it was kind of a period in his life, informative, obviously. And then he went, obviously, to Leeds. And before that, he'd been at the LSE, you know, and kind of come into contact with people like GDH Cole. It's remarkable. And so when he went on and worked, you know, relatively speaking, as an, you know, isolated few people like Colin Seymour Ure, and then getting on board with the network, he was just such an enthusiastic champion of what we did. And obviously, when we were talking about, you know, what's the next step, and we invited him to become president, he was so enthusiastic about taking that role up. And I remember, you know, there were various things about his outlook and his passion. I remember there was one, we organised an event after 2015, his Loughborough session after the 2015 general election, and Jeremy Sinclair, who some of you may know, was the head of the Saatchi and Saatchi team who did Labour Isn't Working and all these other kind of memorable, famous or infamous advertising campaigns on behalf of Margaret Thatcher and the Tories, and he was kind of talking about what he'd done in the 2015 election, you know, undermining Ed Miliband, but he was also talking about his rest of his career. And Jay asked the first question and kind of just tore into him. It was just a remarkable kind of passionate, you know, exhibition of everything that he stood for and believed in. And it wasn't the personal side of him as well. He, you know, such a giving. I remember we did. It was the second ever MPG event at Loughborough, and at the time we seemed to have a bad habit of picking sort of dates when there were momentous things going on in the country, and this one was no different. And it was the petrol strike of 2000. And the conference, we'd organised it obviously for months and been planning this, and there was a limited, patchy, turnout. We weren't quite sure. I mean, we didn't have the facilities of electronic communication like this online. And Jay made it down. Ironically, people from coming on trains were able to come, and Jay obviously came down. And I remember he just partook in everything, and it was sort of limited kind of hospitality. But he was such. And I remember we were listening on because the facilities were closed down. The university, we were listening on my car radio. So it was like back to the 70s, and Jay was stood there with all the other delegates, and it was a nice warm day like it has been today, and he was just, you know, part of the chat and part of the group, and he was always like that. He was just always so giving. He was one of us, but you know, it was a privilege to know him, and for his name to adorn the newsletters and everything else we did, it really set us up in a way that we couldn't have ever wished for better. He was a great man. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dominic. Yeah, a real champion, as you said, for the group. If I can go next to Stephen Coleman. Stephen, if that's okay. I know I haven't warned people of the order or anything, so I'm just going to kind of pick on those that have said they'd say a few words. And obviously Stephen's friendship and working relationship with Jay was so important to him in the last couple of decades, really. So, Stephen, if you'd like to say something.
Thank you. Well, I'm sitting in the room now in my house where Jay and I used to meet very regularly, about once every 3 weeks over the course of the past 15 years. He always used to sit on the armchair behind me. I sat at the other end of the room. Before we came into this room, we would have had lunch, no wine, plenty of gossip. And then we would come in here, and Jay would invariably pull out of his pocket a prepared agenda for our meeting. It was a very informal meeting. There were only two of us, but he was very clear that we wanted to discuss things. If there was a paper that we were both working on, we would debate its contents for hours, or we would debate an article that one of us had urged the other to read. In fact, no one in the course of my career has been so generous in urging me to read articles that he thought would be relevant to me than Jane. Or we would debate an article that we didn't like and talk about how it could have been improved. Or we would come up with policy ideas and we would think about who we could talk to try to get them to go a bit further. And these meetings would go on for 2 or 3 hours, sometimes longer. And I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed and valued them. And I miss having those meetings and will miss having those meetings. And what is it I miss about them? I've known Jay for over 25 years. We were very close friends as well as colleagues. Incidentally, there's a strange thing about our friendship. For about the first 10 years of our friendship, I assumed that Jay was Jewish, and I used to spend quite a lot of time telling him jokes, often in Yiddish. And it took 10 years before one day he said to me, "Stephen, I'm not Jewish and I can't speak Yiddish." And it came as something of a shock. And I said, "I wish you would have told me 10 years ago." But nonetheless, he very kindly laughed at some of them. But what I miss is Jay's use of language. He was one of the few people I know who spoke incomplete sentences. You could transcribe Jay and you would not have to edit anything. I miss his pragmatic feel for political context. He wasn't just a person who studied political communication. He had a surprisingly astute political mind. I think sometimes there was a certain veneer of naivety about him in public, which should not deceive anyone. He was a very astute thinker. But the main thing that I miss intellectually is his normative energy. He was a person who understood why things mattered. And actually, the Academy is in desperate need of that kind of clarity that Jay offered now more than ever, because otherwise we simply become a group of self-glorified train spotters who nobody will take any notice of. We have to know why we should be taken notice of, and Jay did. Well, one final memory, and it really is a final memory of Jay. About a month before he died, Jay was driven over to see me here by his son, Matthew. He wanted to come and see me, and we talked for quite a long time about America after Trump, the new BBC paper on impartiality principles, and then quite a lot of gossip. And then he pulled some papers out of his pocket, and I thought, what's coming here? It was the final draft of a paper that we'd been collaborating on about the prospects of civic communication after the pandemic crisis. It's the last paper that Jay would write. It's the last paper that we would collaborate on. He pulled out this piece of paper, which turned out to be a draft of the article, and then he spoke for 10 minutes without hesitation. And he was trying to urge us to clarify one of the points we were making. And as he was driven away, because he was tired by then and he was ill, I remember thinking, I have been extraordinarily lucky to have been able to work with this guy. And of course, that is what I remember now. there is a gap, both a moral vacuum and an intellectual vacuum, that we will only be able to fulfill collectively, but never, I suspect, individually.
Thank you so much, Stephen. As you say, so much to miss, and very moving. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Dan Jackson next as another past convener of the group. Oh, it sounds like he might be being asked something at home as well. Are you all right to chat, Dan?
Yeah. No, I've just got some company. That's all. All right. He's 13. I think he's just about to surpass me in terms of height. Anyway, that's my son. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Hope you're all well. I'll keep it short. I mean, I certainly didn't know Jay as well as Stephen, or for as long as Dom. I think I met him in about 2015. And yeah, I met him as a hopefully reasonably young scholar, or certainly I still felt like an ECR. And I met him at a conference. We stayed in touch. We shared papers, wrote feedback on each other's papers. It mostly came from him to me. And of course I was very sorry, people are shouting in the background. I was really happy recipient of that. And I looked at one of them the other day. And I remember at the time, I think I sent it to you, Darren. You sent me some feedback on a paper, and it just made me feel 10 feet tall. And I'll never forget that. Sorry. And so we kept in touch after that. I also spoke to other people. And so many other people have received these kind of communications from him. It wasn't unusual for him. But when I think about, when I think about anyone else, I've never received emails like that from people. Maybe we should, just reach out and just say, that was brilliant, and this is why. And it made such a difference to my career. It really helped. But believe in myself, as someone who, especially when you're starting out, you don't always know if you're doing it right. Yeah, you get published and whatever, but it's different to recognizing it from someone who you respect so much, And that's just this is just one anecdote from one person who is one of many who's in a similar situation to that. And many of you could, I'm sure, offer similar anecdotes to that. So that's why he meant so much to me. I also just, as a researcher, when I look back at what he's wrote and seeing him live after all that time as well, his research was truly inspirational for all the reasons you guys have just said. It had such purpose, such clarity, and it was always ethical as well, and it was so normative. And it seems easy things to say, to do, but when you're writing papers, these are the hardest things, especially to write meaningful things on normative debates around the role of media and democracy in political communication, and to do it in the confines of academic publishing and whatever, and the word counts and so on. We often do it lip service, but it ran straight through everything that he wrote. And that's one thing, again, when I think of, even before I met him, but especially after I knew him, I read his work in different ways. And that's one thing that I think we can all take inspiration from. I'll leave it there. Held it together just about.
Thanks so much, Dan. Yeah, I think that you know, like you say, so many people have had those wonderful letters or emails from Jay. And like you say, the feeling of someone that you respect so much, giving you that kind of feedback and that enthusiasm is really amazing. Darren, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great to see everybody, and it's a shame we can't meet up and do this in the proper way. Yeah, it was a real shock in a way, losing Jay, because he's one of those characters you never think will go. Last December, I really thought I'd arrived because I got an email from Jay inviting me to write a chapter for a book he was writing. And that was a real honor to be asked by him. I can't remember when I met him and how long ago it was, probably 15 or so years ago at an event in Leeds. And the thing that shocked me was, I mean, he was sat in the bar of the conference centre we were meeting at for a dinner, and he knew who I was and said, "I read something by you, and that'd been written about 5 years earlier," and he remembered it and knew who I was, and I have no idea. I can't remember who I am myself sometimes. And to have that clarity and remember what he'd read, I thought was amazing. The amount of time he was willing to give to people, and in his later years, when people were helping, you know, he needed a bit of help getting from one building to another at conferences. There was always a queue of people wanting to help him because they wanted his advice with their PhD or an idea they had, and he always gave it, and he spent so much time talking to people. And you know, that I think that's, you know, something very, really rare, and a great man because of that. And I think, yeah, like everyone said, we'll all miss having somebody who perhaps has the time in his later years, but also is so willing to give that time, and always willing to say something nice to somebody. And his memory, and as Stephen said, you know, the ability to just read or just speak something and be so eloquent and to know all that stuff and just be able to say it is amazing, which I'm failing to do now, so I'll stop. But yeah, it's a Jay.
Cheers. Thanks, Darren. I'm going to ask Julie next, who is obviously a very much an active member of the Media and Politics group, but also the deputy head at the School of Media and Communication. So here both as a Leeds person and as a MPG person.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And I'm not going to go off the cuff. I've prepared something, so forgive me for it being read out, but I hypothesise that there will be a high degree of congruence in the words used to describe Jay this evening. If he were to apply his famous skill for comparatively driven methodologies to each of our talks, I'm sure he'd be thrilled with the levels of similarity, the evidence of exceptional normative qualities, and clear identification of the main explanatory variable. That is, of course, the uniqueness of one Professor J.G. Blumler. The wonderful stories and tributes posted on the Ever-Loved Memorial page, and what we've heard tonight too, show how much Jay meant to so many people and how he managed to make each of us feel like we were special. Reflecting on what Jay meant to me, I have a deep sense of loss, because for the last 10 years, he's been a regular feature in every aspect of my academic life, right up until I saw him at the MPG conference in Leeds, which was December 2019. I've had the privilege of working with Jay as a colleague since 2011, and I think many of you know that although he was officially retired, he remained a regular part of the school, coming to almost every research seminar, attending and giving his opinion and presentations from staff at job interviews, to staff at job interviews, teaching at all levels, and regaling us with songs several times a year. Following one of Jay's rules, I've imposed a clear structure to my recollections, and I've reflected on the ways that he's influenced my development as an academic in the 3 areas that define our roles. So if this was one of his songs, it would start very quietly with teaching, get very loud in the research chorus, and build to a grand crescendo in the final section on leadership. Some of you may be surprised to know that Jay was still regularly involved in teaching in the school, and he was keen to give students regular access to him. His generosity extended to PhD students, and when I was postgraduate research tutor, I suggested to the PhD students that they invite Jay to give a closing speech at their conference. Little did they expect that Jay would attend the full 2-day conference, ask a question of every single paper goer, boost their confidence with a rousing closing speech, noting how their projects were furthering the field of media and communication. And then the biggest surprise to them, of course, not a surprise to us, was that he closed with a customary purpose-written song just for them, summing up every single paper and what it all meant. In terms of research, there's far too much to say. His influence began before I got to know him personally, when I discovered and was inspired by his impressive and systematic 1983 analysis of television news coverage of the first European elections whilst I was studying for my PhD. As many of you will also know, Jay has a habit of already having had any good idea that you'll come up with. You name it, he's probably already written about it with characteristic accomplishment. Back in the beginning of the 2000s, little did I know how much Jay would come to shape my intellectual development. Over the decade I've known him, he's taught me so much about rigor, structure, analysis, comparison, and the importance of underpinning research with an unwavering sense of purpose, as many of you have said, the real meaning of impact. I watched from the sidelines as he always asked the question that I was struggling to formulate in my head at the research seminars or conferences, as he continued to be involved in the school's latest research projects right until he died. As this octogenarian, then nonagenarian, travelled around the UK and the world, Chile, Berlin, they were all really really recent trips that he made, delivering conference papers and popping up again with unrelentless vigour to apply his familiar approach to researching political communications each new turn, from the digital to Channel 4's arrival in Leeds to the communication of COVID, as Stephen's just said. Ever since I passed the customary initiation of questions about my intents and purposes over lunch with him as a new kid on the block in 2011, he was dedicated in his support and encouragement of my work. He provided extensive feedback on book proposals. I've had these things that Dan had too. I looked at one today, 10 points were listed on a book proposal of how to make it better. But he did used to deliver them handwritten, like Stephen's notes, over lunch sometimes too. I got regularly congratulatory emails, and he showed unwavering interest in whatever I was planning next, closely followed by suggestions of how I could make it better. His feedback was unusually sharp, incredibly supportive, yet he never let me get away with any slip in intellectual rigour or accuracy. So now to the crescendo ending. The thing with Jay was that he was inspiring, not just in what he did and what he said, not just in that his ideas and writing were fundamental in founding and shaping our field, which would be a myth for most people. It's that he was inspiring in how he did it. This intellectual hero was also a true leader, because by watching him, seeing how he treated people, and being the beneficiary of his mentorship, he provided an inspirational role model for me and for all of us to aspire to. He embraced everything he did with a determined sense of purpose, unwavering loyalty to those who he respected, steadfast determination to go the extra mile, and all with a strong sense of humility. I hope Jay would be very pleased to know for these reasons, he is still very much alive in my world.
Thanks so much, Julie. So I'll just say, on my list that I have of people that have let me know, I've got Bill and Ivor. If anyone else does want to say something, please do let me know. And I should mention as well that the Doug that you can see in that box is Doug and Jack McLeod joining us all the way from the US as well. So I let Luke and Jackie Blumler know that we were doing this, and they said that Doug and Jack would very much want to join us. So hello to you, and do let us know if you'd like to say something. So I'll pass to Bill next. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. And I really appreciate the Media and Politics group putting this together and everyone coming. I'll be very brief. I just want, there have been so many tributes to Jay. I mean, it's just incredible. The number of people who have written obituaries, tributes, memorials in one way or another. It's such a testament to what he meant to so many people. But everyone said anything. So I just wanted to tell an anecdote that nobody would have known. All right. As a way of introduction, I met Jay, and I started at the Annenberg School as an associate professor in 1980. And Elihu Katz was there at that time, and at the Annenberg School in Los Angeles. And Elihu had Jay come to Annenberg several times, and I got to know Jay from his conferences there, and or the conferences we had there, and I roped him into helping me on a book called Wired Cities. It had nothing to do with his interests. I mean, he's interviewing journalists at the BBC and about political campaigns, and here he helps me write a book comparing 4 countries and how they wire cities for interactive telecommunications and so forth. But he liked the comparative idea of it, and we enjoyed working together. And like you, every time I would give him an outline or a draft, he would come back with such helpful comments that it was enormously valuable for me and enjoyable to work with him. He was such a fun guy. And but the story is that towards the mid to later 80s, when he was approaching retirement at Leeds, we tried to hire him away from Leeds. We tried to steal him. And so we invited him for a couple of interviews, but this one interview in particular, first of all, I was totally sold on him because I had worked with him, and I was sort of trying to get him hired at Annenberg. And we went out to dinner, and I went out with another associate professor, Janet Folk, who was more organizational communication. She didn't know very much about Jay at all. But she was worried that Jay, like many retiring people, might come to the Annenberg School to retire, right? So, and just kick up his heels and relax. So anyway, we're out to dinner, and she kept asking questions about, well, it's not like, what have you done lately, but what are you going to do in the future, kind of things. And pretty soon Jay got it, and you could see him go, oh, this is the question. Okay, guys, everybody put your CVs on the table right now. We're going to start from 0. Everybody, we'll start from 0 today. Let's get the date, and we'll see in 5 years who does what work. So he challenged Janet and me to basically say, okay, I don't care how old I am or how old you are, but we'll see who is productive in the future. And it was just so delightful. And you know who won. I mean, you listen to everybody. He's productive to the last moment with Stephen and others. So it was just, I always remember that because he's such a fun person, and he was able to handle questions about his productivity and what he wanted to do in such a delightful way. Anyway, but that's all. I suspect nobody else knew that story. So there you go. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill. And now we know you tried to steal him. So.
Oh, by the way, we did not steal him, and he went to. We lost him to Maryland, and he went half the year to Maryland, and I kept in I kept collaborating with him, and he introduced me to Stephen Coleman later for that. So anyway, it was a very, and we've continued to collaborate. As you know, he helped. He asked me if there's any interest in being a visiting professor at Leeds, and I certainly was and am. Anyway, but thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Ivor Gaber is our last one scheduled speaker. Thanks, Ivor.
Hi, I'm still waiting to see my picture come up on my big screen, but I suppose it won't. I'm just seeing a big picture of Katie, which is very pleasant, but you can all see and hear me, I assume. Yep. Yeah, I'm still reeling from the news, having thought I'd known Jay for the last 30 years, that he's not Jewish. I'd always just assumed he was the ultimate archetypal New York Jew, even if he wasn't. So Stephen, you have taken the wind out my sails, but I shall play on. I thought I'd first met Jay in James Curran's garden, singing as ever at a party. And then when I went to see who was singing, I realized that this was the guy I'd seen around the BBC, or I can't remember if it was BBC or ITN Newsrooms, taking notes and interviewing everybody, but I was what was known in the trade as pond life, far too lowly to be interviewed by Jay, who was I assume he was with Michael researching the book, or the series of books, which reminds me, in 2010, the Times Higher asked me to write what they pretentiously called the canon. They were doing the canon in various disciplines, and I automatically wrote about the crisis of public communication, which I think is a hugely significant turning point, if you like, or book, most important book. I'm just trying to put my thoughts together about Jay. I used to see him fairly regularly, not because I was in Leeds, but he had one of his sons, I'm not sure which, in South London, and so he'd come into Goldsmith when I was there, and he would always give a really stimulating talk to one of my classes. And then he came to Goldsmiths when, with Dom, I organised the second MPG group. It was to celebrate, if that's the right word, the 10th anniversary of the televising of Parliament. And I remember we had one Robin Day, or Sir Robin as he liked to be called, telling us how it was all due to him that we televised Parliament. And Jay, in a way that only he could do, lacerated him gently but firmly, putting him in his place, because Robin was completely unaware of all of what had been happening behind the scenes many years before. But it was Jay because he was a wonderfully kind, warm person, but he could be quite sharp if he had a disagreement with somebody, but sharp in a gentle way. And he certainly was sharp with Robin Day. So it was good to see the great inquisit. I'm not going to just repeat for the sake of it. I just want to pick up 2 points of memories of Jay. Stephen mentioned his normative. He had a passion for ethics, I suppose. He did it because he thought it was really important. And we all know of his commitment to public service broadcasting. Passion would be a better word. His passion for public service broadcasting, which informed so much of his work, and his passion for democracy and the public sphere and the sort of things he's been writing about with Stephen over the last 10, 15 years. He was obviously a warm, humane, funny man. I was always, just going back for a moment, he came over here first, he told me, to study under Harold Lasky, who was one of the intellectual left-wing giants at LSE, and it just put him in history, although of course his history went back before then. But it was part of his social democratic passion, which I really liked. So I'll just end with a memory from MPG in Leeds, 2019, when I gave a paper, and he came up to me afterwards and said very quietly, "That's the best paper you've ever done." And I just walked away. He'd listened to an awful lot of my papers, so it meant that most of them had not been very good. And I just walked away thinking, if Jay Blumler said that's the best thing I've done, I'm going to write it up, which I didn't always do, but I did on that occasion and have done. So yeah, all I can say, and I'm sure Katie's going to do this game, but I'll be the first. Thanks for the memory, Jay.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Ivor. So we're at the end of the time. If anyone hasn't said anything and wanted to say something, please do give me a wave. I know for many of you, you just wanted to come and listen. Doug, would you like to say something? Or Jack?
Yeah, this is Doug McLeod. I'm a professor at the School of Journalism at the University of Wisconsin. I'm here with my father, who's a professor emeritus from the University of Wisconsin, who has done a lot of work with Jay. And so he probably have a lot more to say than I would. But I guess I'm gonna do a quick speech for the Clan McLeod to give you a little bit of a different perspective on Jay. Yes, I follow my father's footsteps. I've done research in mass communication. I've cited Jay extensively. I took a seminar with him as an undergraduate and was profoundly influenced by Jay. But I'd like to give you the perspective of a scared 12-year-old who was yanked by his parents out of his comfortable life in school in America and carried off to England to study while my father was on sabbatical. And when we flew into England, it was so densely foggy that the plane couldn't land in Leeds. It had to land in Edinburgh. And we waited and waited all night in Edinburgh until the plane could fly into Newcastle. That was as close as we could get. Then we took a bus to Leeds and we arrived and it was so dark outside. We were exhausted, had no idea what time it was. The Blumlers came and picked us up at the airport. It was so foggy that Jay had to walk out in front of the car in order to find the road for Gina, his wife, to drive the car. Now, if you can imagine a 12-year-old waking up the next morning, looking out the window and all you could see was white, it was a very scary experience, not knowing where I was in a strange country and looking out and only seeing white. But that fear was quickly alleviated by the wonderful hospitality that the Blumler family showed us. Jay was entertaining us, making us feel good and right at home. And I ended up becoming best of friends with his son, Luke. And I just wanted to pass on one last anecdote about how a sense of humor can be passed on genetically. I ended up going to school with Luke. Of course, I was unfamiliar with British schools and I could never find the right uniform. So I was always being drawn to the headmaster's office. But one of the strange experiences that I had was preschool mass, where we had to sing all these strange religious songs and I had no idea what the words were. And I was getting chastised by the instructors for not singing. And I looked to Luke and said, Luke, I don't know the words to any of these songs. How am I going to sing along? And Luke looked at me and he just said, just say the words burgle, burgle, burgle over and over again, and they'll think you're singing. And that to me was something that was passed on from his father to me that helped me feel at home in England. And I will always, and so will my father, respect the hospitality and generosity that the Blumlers showed us.
Thanks so much, Doug. It's so nice to have a story about hospitality in a completely different context as well. So I've got a few images and hopefully a little clip of Jay singing to kind of play us out. But Stephen would just like to say something before I do that. Stephen.
I just wanted to comment on two things that other people had said. Don mentioned GDH Cole. GDH Cole was actually Jay's supervisor for the first PhD. He started doing a PhD on working class students going to university. And he submitted a first draft of the first chapter to GDH Cole. And he said, look, this was one of my great intellectual heroes. This man really must know what he's talking about. And he said he gave it back to me, and the only comments he made were about the grammar. He said I was so offended that he had nothing else to say, that I never had anything more to do with him. The other thing I want to say to Doug McLeod is that I was the third recipient of most of your email exchanges over the course of well over a decade, because every time you wrote to Jay, he was so interested in what you were saying that he would send the email straight on to me and say, what do you think? And then we would discuss what you were saying, normally about the failings of the Bush presidency. So I want you to know that there was someone listening into that correspondence. And I really found this evening terrific, and thank everybody for the comments that they've made.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And yeah, fantastic words to finish on, really. So I know there's going to be lots of other groups and that are going to be paying tribute to Jay as well over the next year or so. But we wanted our little group to get in there and commemorate and celebrate Jay's life and work. So thank you, everyone. And hopefully this is going to work. And it's just a few images of Jay that people have shared, and then hopefully at the end we will hear him singing a song that he did for one of the MPG conferences. So let's hope this works.
I think there may be a song about all this. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. It takes a worried man to sing a worried song. I'm worried now, but I'll not be worried long. Hey, wait a minute, that last line's not right. 'Cause everything's going wrong.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Katie. That was terrific.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Great little collection at the end there.
Thanks. Hopefully we can all see each other in real life soon.